Welcome to Revenge with Roman, where every story dives deep into betrayal, heartbreak, and the dark corners of human emotion. In today's chilling tale, we unravel a nightmare no woman should ever face, the ultimate betrayal from within her own home. When Melissa, a devoted wife and loving mother, discovers her husband's sick secret with her own daughter, her world shatters into pieces. But from those broken fragments, she builds something far more dangerous, a plan that would make them both wish they had never crossed her. What begins as heartbreak slowly transforms into cold, calculated vengeance, one that neither her husband nor her daughter sees coming. This isn't just a story of pain. It's about power, justice, and a revenge so twisted it turns love itself into their greatest fear. Melissa Hart had always believed her marriage was built on trust. For 20 years, she had stood beside her husband, Daniel, through every storm life threw their way. They'd built a home, raised a daughter, and shared laughter that once filled the walls like music. But lately, that music had gone silent. Daniel's eyes no longer held warmth when they met hers. His voice, once tender, had grown distant and distracted. He had excuses for everything: late nights at work, long business calls, sudden weekend trips. Melissa wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to the illusion that her family was still whole, but deep down, something dark was whispering to her. It started with small things, little details that didn't add up. Daniel's cologne lingered in the house even on days he claimed he'd been out of town. His shirts, freshly washed, sometimes smelled faintly of the perfume she didn't wear. But what truly unsettled Melissa was the way her daughter, Lily, had started acting lately. At 18, Lily had always been a confident girl. Bright, ambitious, full of energy. But now she seemed anxious, her eyes darting away whenever Daniel entered the room. Melissa caught fleeting glances between them, subtle but loaded with something unspoken. The laughter they shared during dinner didn't sound like the easy bond of father and daughter anymore. It had a strange edge, one that made Melissa's stomach twist. She tried to dismiss it at first. It felt impossible, too horrifying to even imagine. This was her family and her blood, her love. Maybe Lily was just being moody. Maybe Daniel was trying too hard to connect with her. Melissa wanted to be wrong so badly that she convinced herself she was. But one night, the whispering doubt became a scream she couldn't ignore. It was a rainy Thursday. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that presses against the walls and amplifies every sound. Melissa lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling that uneasy tug in her chest again. Daniel had said he was working late, but something inside her wouldn't let her rest. She got up, slipped on her robe, and went downstairs for water. That's when she heard it. Faint laughter, coming from the guest room. Her heart skipped. Lily wasn't supposed to be home that night. She'd said she was staying with a friend. Slowly, Melissa crept closer, her pulse pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The door was slightly ajar. Through the small crack, she saw the unmistakable silhouette of her husband, his hand brushing Lily's hair as she leaned into him, their bodies far too close. Melissa's world tilted. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Her fingers trembled against the doorknob, her throat tightening as her mind tried to reject what her eyes were seeing. Her husband, her partner, her daughter's father, was touching Lily in a way no father ever should. She wanted to scream, to burst into the room and rip the world apart, but something inside her froze. It wasn't fear that held her back. It was realization. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It had been going on for a while. The glances, the excuses, the tension in the air. Everything suddenly made sense in the most horrifying way. Melissa stumbled back, her vision blurring as tears filled her eyes. Her knees almost gave out as she made her way back to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed, numb, her body shaking uncontrollably. She thought of every memory, the day Lily was born, the promises Daniel had made, the sacrifices she had given for this family. And now, it all felt like a cruel joke. The betrayal was too deep to put into words. Her heart wasn't just broken. It was shattered beyond repair. For hours, Melissa sat there, the sounds of the rain blending with her quiet sobs. The night stretched endlessly, but somewhere between the tears and the silence, something inside her began to change. The pain that had threatened to consume her began to harden, turning cold and sharp. She stopped shaking. She stopped crying. Instead, She began to think, not as a broken wife, but as a woman wronged beyond forgiveness. She replayed every moment, every lie, every excuse, and slowly, the first pieces of a plan began to take shape in her mind. The next morning, when Daniel and Lily came down for breakfast, Melissa greeted them with a calmness that startled even herself. Her voice was steady, her smile soft. To them, she was the same loving wife and mother. But behind her eyes, a storm was quietly gathering. As she watched them exchange subtle glances across the table, Melissa's heart no longer ached. It burned with purpose. She knew what she had seen. She knew what they had done. And she knew one thing for certain: they would never see her coming. The betrayal had awakened something inside her, something Daniel and Lily didn't yet understand. They had taken her love and turned it into pain. Now she would take that pain and turn it into their punishment. The next few days passed in a haze of forced smiles and quiet observation. Melissa moved through her home like a ghost, her face calm, her voice steady, her every action deliberate. But inside she was unraveling and rebuilding all at once. The image of what she'd seen, Daniel's hand in Lily's hair, the way they looked at each other, played over and over in her mind, each replay cutting deeper than the last. She couldn't confront them yet, not without proof, not without control. She needed certainty, not emotion. If she was going to destroy them, she would do it with undeniable evidence. Her opportunity came sooner than she expected. One afternoon, Daniel left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went to take a shower. Normally, Melissa would have ignored it. They'd always trusted each other enough not to pry. But now that trust was dead. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. His passcode, her birthday, still worked. The cruel irony of that made her lips curl into a bitter smile. At first, the messages seemed ordinary. Work group chats, family reminders, but then she saw it. A contact saved under a name that didn't belong. Lila. The name was a disguise, but Melissa's stomach twisted as soon as she saw the first message. It was Lily. The words on the screen confirmed every nightmare she had feared. I miss you already. Last night was perfect. The timestamp was from the night she'd seen them together. Her pulse quickened as she scrolled, unable to stop herself. The messages were filled with intimate confessions, secret plans, and photos that made her vision blur with tears and rage. There was no misunderstanding now. No room for doubt. Her husband, the man she had loved for 2 decades, was sleeping with their daughter. And worse, they had done it under her roof, smiling at her every morning like nothing was wrong. Melissa dropped the phone on the counter as if it had burned her. She pressed her palms to the cool marble surface, breathing hard, trying to steady herself. The world seemed to spin around her, but she refused to collapse. Not this time. She had seen enough. Later that night, when Daniel came to bed, she pretended to be asleep. His soft humming as he slipped under the sheets made her skin crawl. Every time his hand brushed against her, she had to fight the urge to recoil. In the dim glow of the bedside lamp, she turned her face away, biting her lip until she tasted blood. She didn't want him to see the fury in her eyes. Not yet. Over the next few days, Melissa became an actress in her own life. She smiled at Lily, asked about her college applications, cooked dinner, laughed at small jokes. It was all part of the mask she wore. Beneath it, she was carefully collecting every piece of evidence she could. The phone messages were just the beginning. She synced Daniel's phone to her laptop, making quiet copies of their conversations, emails, and photos. Each file she saved was another nail in the coffin she was building for them. She noticed things differently now. The way Daniel's eyes followed Lily when she walked across the room, the way Lily's voice softened when she spoke to him. They thought they were clever, subtle, but to Melissa, every gesture screamed betrayal. Sometimes she'd catch them exchanging a look, a small smile, a flicker of connection that made her heart twist in disgust. She wondered if they even felt guilt, or if the thrill of secrecy had blinded them completely. At night, when the house was dark, Melissa would sit at her desk with the glow of her laptop illuminating her face. She reread the messages until she could recite them by heart. Each word fueled her resolve. They had stolen everything from her: her marriage, her motherhood, her peace. but she wasn't going to let them get away with it. If they wanted to play games in the dark, she would drag them into the light. Her eyes landed on one particular message from Daniel. "Don't worry, she'll never find out. I know how to keep secrets." A slow, chilling smile crept across Melissa's face. He was wrong. She had already found out, and now she was the one keeping secrets. But unlike hers wouldn't destroy her. They would destroy him. The next morning, she watched them together at breakfast. Lily scrolling on her phone, Daniel sipping coffee, the two of them stealing quiet glances when they thought she wasn't looking. Melissa stirred her tea slowly, her reflection calm in the cup's surface. Neither of them noticed how her gaze lingered just a second too long, how her eyes didn't hold the softness of a wife or a mother anymore. They were cold, calculating, waiting. Inside her, something had shifted permanently. The woman who once cried over broken trust was gone. What replaced her was sharper, stronger, someone who could lie as easily as they did, someone who would use their own secrets as weapons. Melissa had the proof she needed, and now she only had one thought echoing through her mind, steady as a heartbeat. It was time to prepare for the fall. Melissa learned to wear forgiveness like armor. After the storm of discovery and the cold clarity that followed, she understood that raw confrontation would only scatter the evidence and give them time to hide what they'd done. So she chose silence as her weapon and patience as her strategy. Each morning she practiced a softer voice, asked casual questions about Lily's classes and Daniel's work, and let her smile settle into the practiced curve of someone who still believed in the family they'd built. They ate together, watched television, and traded small talk while she cataloged their lives with a precision born of fury. At first, gathering proof meant small tentative acts that hurt like admitting a truth out loud. She started by copying messages from Daniel's phone onto a secure drive she kept hidden in the attic. She learned his patterns, how he unlocked his phone without thinking, how he left it charging on the bedside table when he took late showers. She memorized his passcode because old habits had become their undoing. The date of their 10th anniversary was something he never changed. Each saved message, each photo, was a fossil of their betrayal she placed into a digital archive with neat folders and labels. She printed screenshots and hid the pages between the pages of old tax records in the filing cabinet. But Melissa knew a phone alone wouldn't be enough. People could lie about context. Memories could be rewritten. She needed something that could not be denied. Video, audio, a trail that proved the intimacy and the deceit in ways words could not. She set up small, unobtrusive cameras in the living room and the hallway, not in places that would make the evidence inadmissible, but where no one would expect surveillance in a modern, trusting home. She bought the devices with cash and had them delivered to her office address. By day, she was the dutiful wife. By night, she taught herself the subtle art of positioning angles, adjusting microphone sensitivity, and time-stamping files so a later explanation would not erase the truth. Melissa planted her traps with cold, methodical care. She learned to read Lily's habits, the way she'd leave her room at odd hours, the small coffee stain on the sleeve of the sweater she favored. She would wait until the house settled, then follow the soft thumps of footsteps down corridors, watching from shadows as her daughter passed. There was a cruelty to it that she had no time to justify. This was not about vengeance for its own sake anymore, but about dismantling the world Daniel and Lily had hidden behind a wall of ordinary things. She also reached into places she had never thought to look. Old photo albums revealed patterns she'd missed, vacations where Daniel sat too close to Lily in photographs, comments and captioned snapshots that, at the time, seemed harmless. Bank statements showed small transfers under vague labels, a credit card receipt from a boutique that sold things with names that matched the perfume Melissa sometimes caught in the hallway. She copied everything. She labeled it. She cataloged dates, times, and the small details that would make a jury, or an unforgiving audience, understand that this was not a brief lapse, but a sustained betrayal. While she collected, Melissa perfected her performance. She forgave out loud, hugged, fixed meals, and even left little notes around the house that betrayed nothing but warmth. "Have a good day," she scribbled on a Post-it and left it on the fridge. Daniel kissed her forehead in front of Lily and told her she was being dramatic when she asked casual questions. Lily rolled her eyes and called her overprotective. Their reactions were music to her ears. Their denial and arrogance made them easier to entrap. In private, Melissa let bitterness wash across her face for a few minutes, and then scrubbed it off, emerging composed and smiling for the world. Friends who knew the family noticed nothing. Melissa was careful with her social face. She canceled a dinner once, blamed stress at work for a flurry of late nights, and let pity from neighbors cement her guise as the overwhelmed, forgiving wife. She kept her circle small, told no one the truth, and, when offered sympathy, accepted it with a grateful squeeze of the hand. Secrets, she learned, are safest when they sit alone inside you. There were risks. Once, Lily left her laptop open and Melissa nearly froze with temptation. Inside were messages that hinted at trips and moments Melissa hadn't been privy to. Her hands shook as she copied files, a small sob fumbling out that she masked with a cough. Another time, Daniel nearly caught her mid-transfer from his phone to her drive. He lingered in the doorway, a coffee mug in his hand, and smiled in a way that presumed innocence. Melissa thanked him for bringing it and offered to take the cup to the sink. He left, unaware his world was being dismantled bite by bite. To strengthen her case, she reached beyond the house. She requested a hard copy of some records from the phone company under the guise of preparing taxes. She discreetly photographed receipts at the boutique and saved bank ATM slips that proved late-night withdrawals. She made contact with a private investigator under a false name and listened to the PI's reports, learning new ways to conceal and reveal. Each move was calculated to protect her evidence from being erased, hidden, or explained away. At night, alone in the attic with the glow of a laptop and the rain tapping the roof, Melissa would watch the footage she'd captured. She watched faces she'd loved act like strangers. She watched the warmth in her daughter's smile shift into something secretive, and the way Daniel's hand would linger. Watching was worse than seeing the first time. It was a slow exposure of the whole lie. Each file she saved reinforced her resolve, and each time-stamped clip became a small shard of inevitability. The more she had, the less she feared. Her plan was no longer just to punish. It was to make sure they could not rebuild on deceit. She would collect everything necessary to ensure that the truth, once revealed, could not be spun into anything but the brutal reality of what had happened. She imagined a future where apologies were meaningless because the record would not let them be. And as she arranged her evidence, labeled folders blinking silently on her screen, Melissa felt something unfamiliar. A quiet satisfaction that this time, justice might be served on terms she dictated, not theirs. Melissa became a master of small cruelties disguised as tenderness. If humiliation was a weapon, so was complacency. And she wielded both with a calm that made her family believe they had the upper hand. In the morning, she kissed Daniel's cheek as he left for work, pressed a warm hand to Lily's shoulder as she headed out, and asked idle questions about classes and meetings with a voice that sounded like concern. She practiced forgetting the images in her head and learned to project the ordinary, the domestic warmth that would disarm any suspicion. Her forgiveness was a performance, perfectly timed and perfectly believable. She studied them the way a predator studies the patterns of its prey. Daniel responded to praise. A compliment softened him, made him more careless. Lily recoiled from criticism. A gentle remark made her eager for approval. Melissa used these truths like levers. She let Daniel tell her small stories about his day, nodding, asking the kinds of follow-up questions that felt supportive, but were really invitations for him to speak freely. She let Lily rest her head against her shoulder during sad movies, let her lean a little too close at times, and watched the way Daniel's jaw tightened when he thought no one would see. Each piece of overconfidence they revealed became a thread she could pull later. Her acts of contrition were designed to lull them into believing their secret was safe. She spoke of couples counseling she'd read about, of forgiveness as a journey, as if she were the one choosing to walk it. She called Lily to ask about scholarship deadlines, and then listened intently, even when the conversation veered into the kind of intimacy that had once been purely parental. She dropped casual comments about trusting one another, about the strength of family, and watched how those words loosened the careful guard they kept. They took comfort in her seeming vulnerability, in the idea that she would always be the forgiving mother and loyal wife. That assumption was their mistake. Melissa also cultivated allies without revealing why. She invited neighbors to small gatherings, arranged for the family to be photographed at seemingly casual events, and made sure there were times when cameras and third parties would corroborate the ordinary parts of their life. She smiled through these moments because she needed witnesses who would later be astonished to learn of the lie. The more ordinary their public life looked, the more spectacular their fall would appear. She wanted the world to see how cleverly they had wrapped their deceit inside a perfect domestic facade. Behind closed doors, she used a subtler, crueler tactic. She fed them small victories. She praised Daniel's parenting in front of Lily, praised Lily's maturity and discretion in front of Daniel, and watched how praise swelled each of them with self-importance. Confidence breeds carelessness, she reminded herself, and carelessness leaves traces. Melissa learned to time these planted gratifications to the rhythm of their days so that when the moment came to expose them, those very moments would be transformed into evidence of arrogance and entitlement. At times, she played the naive wife so convincingly that she startled herself. When Daniel lingered with a hand on the back of Lily's chair, she would call out a memory from years ago, a private joke that implied she believed in the family's unbroken history. The joke made them relax. The laugh that followed dissolved suspicion. Lily would roll her eyes, Daniel would chuckle, and Melissa would tuck away the image like a coin in a secret purse. She used humor as a balm, a way to normalize their proximity until they forgot how wrong it felt to them as adults. She also manipulated logistics. Little things that seemed harmless but were actually strategic. She volunteered to pick Lily up from the library at odd hours, knowing it would make the pair more likely to bump into one another at home, and thereby take risks they would later regret. She suggested family dinners when she knew the mood would be light, steering conversation toward topics that encouraged them to linger together. Sometimes she deliberately left the house for an hour, leaving them to their own devices while she timed the route she'd take to ensure she could return with plausible surprise. Each calculated absence was a way to watch how far they would push boundaries when they believed they were unobserved. Manipulation extended to emotion as well. Melissa learned to mirror their moods, to reflect back exactly what they wanted to see. Concern when Lily fretted about a test, admiration when Daniel recited a workplace anecdote. Her empathy was a tool. It made them confess little things, slip-up comments that became footholds for later pressure. Once over coffee, Lily spoke of a moment that, on its face, sounded like teenage drama. Melissa inquired gently, and Lily, eager for validation, offered a detail that matched a timestamp on a photo Melissa had hidden away. Those coincidences piled up like proof without anyone noticing the architect behind them. Underneath the calm, Melissa cultivated patience until it felt like an organic part of her being. She rehearsed not reacting, practiced letting slights and suggestive conversations slide past, and swallowed the urge to confront until she had shaped the narrative she wanted the world to see. Each day she tightened her control, not through force, but through the steady application of trust and reward. It was an artistry of cruelty. She bent affection into a chain that would later bind them in public disgrace. She plotted small tests, minor traps that would reveal character and pattern. A misplaced invitation left where Daniel would find it. A favor asked of Lily in front of a friend. A supposedly casual question about a late-night errand. Each was designed to provoke a reaction that would crystallize their guilt into something tangible. When they failed those tests, when they let their guard drop and behaved like conspirators instead of family, Melissa stored those moments away with the same meticulous care she used to collect photographs, labeled, dated, and ready for the moment they would mean the most. All the while, she maintained the appearance of a woman learning to forgive. People who saw her at church or at the grocery store complimented her on her grace. Daniel, intoxicated by the belief that his betrayals had been swallowed by her mercy, grew louder in his carelessness. Lily, comforted by the illusion of forgiveness, grew softer in her secrecy. Neither of them suspected that the forgiveness was a loop of rope she was weaving around them, a soft and invisible snare that would tighten when she chose to pull. Melissa moved through their days like a clock winding itself, each small act of apparent kindness bringing the hands closer to the hour when everything would be unmasked, and they would finally understand how completely she had controlled the narrative for so long. Melissa chose the night of Lily's graduation party for her final act. It was the perfect stage. Family, friends, neighbors, everyone who had admired their picture-perfect home gathered under strings of golden lights. The backyard shimmered, with laughter, clinking glasses, and the low hum of summer conversation. Daniel wore his pride like a crown, toasting his daughter's accomplishments, his arm around Lily's shoulders as if nothing in the world could break their bond. To the guests, it was a touching sight, a proud father celebrating his daughter's future. To Melissa, it was the most obscene performance she had ever watched. But she smiled through it all, a hostess radiant and composed, her eyes sparkling with the kind of calm that hides a storm. For weeks she had prepared every detail, the guest list, the catering, the speeches. But the most important part of the night wasn't on any schedule. It was buried in the heart of the evening, waiting like a loaded gun behind the glittering laughter. She had synced the projector with her laptop, claiming she'd made a slideshow of Lily's childhood photos as a surprise. Everyone expected sentimental tears, a proud mother reminiscing about her baby girl growing up. And in a way, that's exactly what they would get. Only the kind of memories they would see weren't the ones anyone imagined. As the evening deepened, Melissa called for everyone's attention. "Before dessert," she said softly, her voice warm, "I want to share something special, a small tribute to the people I love most." Daniel smiled, lifting his glass toward her, unaware of the tremor of anticipation beneath her calm. Lily blushed, rolling her eyes in embarrassment the way she always did when her mother got sentimental. Melissa pressed a key on her laptop. The lights dimmed, and the projector hummed to life. The first images were innocent. Photos of Lily, as a child, Daniel holding her hand at the beach, birthday cakes, family trips. Laughter and soft applause filled the garden. Melissa stood quietly, her fingers tightening around the remote. Then the next photo appeared, a grainy screenshot of a text message. "I miss you already. Last night was perfect." The room went still. The message was followed by another image, Lily's name on the screen, Daniel's response beneath it. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered. Daniel's face went pale, his smile collapsing. Melissa didn't stop. The slideshow continued, each image cutting deeper. Timestamps, photos, receipts, messages, little fragments of the life they thought they had hidden. A quiet gasp escaped Lily's lips as her name and number appeared again, followed by a blurred photo that left nothing to interpretation. The whispers turned into horrified murmurs. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some turning away, others staring in disbelief. Daniel leapt from his chair, his voice cracking. "Melissa, turn it off! This isn't—" But Melissa pressed the button again, freezing the image on the screen. A photo of the two of them, their faces unmistakable. "This," she said, calmly, her voice slicing through the chaos, "is what my husband and my daughter have been doing while I was planning her future and holding our family together." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Lily crumpled into her seat, her eyes wide, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Daniel reached for her, but Melissa stepped between them, her presence radiating ice. "Don't you dare touch her," she hissed, her voice trembling only with rage. "You've both taken everything from me, my trust, my home, my name. And now, you can have what you've earned, the truth." Someone in the crowd muttered an apology, as if witnessing something too intimate, too brutal to belong in public. Phones were already out, recording, capturing the moment that would travel faster than any rumor ever could. Melissa stood tall, unflinching, as the flashes lit her face. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. For the first time in months, she felt clean, hollow, but clean. Daniel stammered something about misunderstanding, about getting help, his words desperate and collapsing under their own absurdity. Lily sobbed, begging her mother to stop, her voice cracking like glass. Melissa simply turned off the projector and looked at them both with a stillness that was almost kind. "Help?" she whispered. "You needed help long before I found out." But what you both needed more was to be seen for what you really are. The guests began to leave, awkward and silent, their faces pale in the harsh light. A few tried to comfort Melissa, but she brushed them off gently. The damage was already done. Not to her, but to them. Every relationship they had, every reputation, every scrap of dignity had just been stripped away. The world would whisper their names for all the wrong reasons. When the last of the cars pulled away, Melissa stood in the empty yard, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration-turned-funeral. Balloons drifted across the grass. The air smelled of burnt sugar and spilled wine. Inside the house, she could hear Daniel shouting, Lily crying, the chaos of their world collapsing. She didn't move to stop it. Instead, she looked up at the sky, her face lit by the fading glow of the party lights, and drew a long, steady breath. The night air was cold, and for the first time in a long while, Melissa felt it. Freedom creeping into her bones, sharp and cleansing. The revenge she had planned for months had unfolded with perfect precision, and though it left behind ashes, they were not her own. The morning after the party, the house felt like a tomb. Silence clung to the walls, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak of floorboards under Melissa's slow steps. The decorations from the night before still hung limp, deflated balloons, half-torn banners, wine-stained napkins scattered across the floor. The air smelled faintly of smoke and bitterness. The world outside had already begun to whisper. Melissa knew that by now, everyone in town had seen the videos, the screenshots, the truth she had unleashed. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages, sympathy from some, shock from others, but she didn't answer any of them. Her work was done. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his face gray and swollen from a sleepless night. He didn't look at her when she entered. He just stared down at the cold cup of coffee between his hands, as if searching for words that could patch together the life he had shattered. But there were none. Lily was upstairs, her door locked, the sound of quiet sobs leaking through the wood like the echo of guilt. Melissa had heard her crying for hours, the kind of deep, broken crying that comes when the mask is gone and reality finally cuts through denial. Melissa stood by the window, looking out at the morning light spilling across the garden where everything had fallen apart. The calm in her chest was strange. Not joy, not even relief, but something deeper, quieter. The storm had passed, and in its wake there was nothing left to destroy. She didn't need to shout or curse anymore. Her silence spoke louder than any outburst ever could. Daniel finally broke it. "Melissa," he whispered, his voice cracked and small. "Please, we can fix this. I can get help. She can—" Melissa turned toward him slowly, her expression unreadable. "Fix this?" she repeated softly, almost as if tasting the words. "You don't fix something like this, Daniel. You live with it. You carry it. You remember it every time you close your eyes." Her voice didn't rise, but the venom beneath it was unmistakable. "You and Lily destroyed everything pure in this house. You took love and turned it into something I can't even name. And now you want forgiveness?" He looked up, his eyes hollow, desperate. "I made a mistake." "No," she interrupted, her tone sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or losing your temper. What you did was a choice. Repeated, deliberate, disgusting." She stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. "You didn't just betray me. You ruined our daughter's life. And I hope when people see your faces now, they remember exactly who you are. The man who called himself a father, and the girl who thought love could excuse sin." He had no answer. His lips trembled, but the words wouldn't come. Melissa stared at him for a long, silent moment before turning away. She didn't need to see his regret. It was meaningless now. Regret didn't erase the images burned into her mind, or the months of deceit that had hollowed her out from the inside. She walked upstairs, her footsteps slow but steady. Outside Lily's door, she paused. The crying had quieted to faint sniffles. Melissa almost spoke, but the words died before they reached her lips. What could she possibly say? That she still loved her daughter, that she hated her. Maybe both were true. She pressed a hand against the door for a moment, feeling the fragile heartbeat of the girl inside, then withdrew it. Some wounds were too deep to heal, and some truths too poisonous to forgive. Later that day, Melissa packed a small suitcase, just essentials, clothes, a few keepsakes, the folder with her evidence, and a single photograph from years ago. Lily as a child, laughing with ice cream smeared across her cheeks, Daniel holding her with pride. She stared at it for a long while before folding it carefully and placing it at the bottom of the bag. Then she left the house keys on the counter beside Daniel's untouched coffee. Outside, the air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of rain. She slid into her car, started the engine, and looked at the house one last time. Behind those walls were the ghosts of everything she had loved, and everything she had destroyed. But Melissa didn't feel guilt. Only certainty. She had given them what they deserved. Not death, not violence, but exposure. She had stripped them bare before the world, and forced them to face the ugliness they created. As she drove away, the sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the road ahead. The reflection in her rearview mirror showed the house shrinking in the distance until it vanished completely. For the first time in years, she felt weightless. The woman who had once lived for her family no longer existed. In her place was someone new, someone forged from betrayal and silence, sharpened by grief and fire. Melissa didn't know where she was going yet, but it didn't matter. The destination wasn't important. What mattered was that she was finally free, and the ones who had betrayed her would wake every morning, haunted by the nightmare she'd left behind.